Hey guys, and welcome back to Battlefront Updates and another Star Wars Battlefront 2/Battlefront sequel video. Today we are continuing the top 5 the community wants series, and today we are talking about heroes. I asked you guys to tell me in the comments below of my last video which heroes you wanted to see in the next game, no matter if they were in the last game, which era they are from, and so on. Unfortunately, pretty much no one actually suggested any of the heroes that are in the current game, so all the 5 heroes I'm gonna talk about today are gonna be heroes that have been either in the old games or not at all. So keep in mind that although this list will not contain any original trilogy heroes, we will most likely get some of those from the current game in the next one, because a Star Wars game without Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, Leia and so on would be a little bit strange to say the least. But I just wanted to make that perfectly clear before I go on to these 5 heroes, because again, these 5 heroes are on top of the ones we already have. So let's get started. We pretty much only have Clone Wars heroes here, simply because, well, there isn't really many light side heroes in the sequel trilogy, at least no heroes that are interesting enough for the community apparently. So the first one I have is actually Anakin Skywalker. Kind of a given that he would be in the game if they add Clone Wars, because he is of course one of the main characters in the prequel trilogy. The question though is that since we already have Vader and might have Vader in the next game as well, will they actually be allowed to be on the battlefield at the same time? That's the big question, and I mean that entirely depends on how they would implement the next game. If it does have Clone Wars, will they merge it together or will you play them separately? So there's a big question mark surrounding him, but he is a very important character. Personally, I actually thought he was one of the most boring heroes in the old games, because he just felt like a bland Jedi, but that's because the old games didn't really have a lot to make the heroes unique, and in the movies he doesn't really pull off any cool stuff either until he becomes Darth Vader. So I'm not sure how interesting he would be gameplay wise if he was in the game, but I think he would be more important simply because he's such a major character in the prequels. Next up we have Obi-Wan Kenobi. Of course everyone wants Obi-Wan, and most of you didn't really specify which version of Obi-Wan you wanted. You want the original trilogy Obi-Wan or the prequel trilogy Obi-Wan. Personally, I think that the prequel era Obi-Wan would obviously be a lot more fun in terms of gameplay, I think, because he would be a lot more agile, better at lightsaber duels and all that kind of stuff, whereas if we had the old Obi-Wan, he would be this lumbering character that might have quite strong force powers, but that won't be as powerful with his lightsaber. So it's quite hard to know which one people want the most, because I doubt that they would add both of them, at least not at the same time. But I do think that most of you actually wanted a young Obi-Wan, because, well, Clone Wars and everyone wants Clone Wars. And that of course brings us on to the next character, which is Yoda. Everyone wants Yoda. He is in the original trilogy, but he doesn't really fight. So I'm assuming, again, Yoda here is going to be the prequel Yoda that most people are talking about. He would be a very unique character to play as due to how small he is, so he would have a very small hitbox, and I remember that in the old games he was quite tricky to hit, and I'd imagine it would be the same thing in the new game. He would be very hard to hit with a normal blaster, and the most effective way to counter him would probably be to use some sort of explosives or other weapons that have splash damage, so you can just shoot the ground around him, but you don't actually have to hit him dead on. In terms of force powers, in the old games he had a force push and a force pull, which I think could be quite interesting. A force pull I would love to see, but other than that I would like to see something a bit more unique, something we haven't seen in a game before. If we look at episode 3, some of the suggestions I could give you would be that maybe he can even pick up some objects and throw. That would be a little bit tricky to implement in a game that isn't built around that, but other than that, he could actually throw his lightsaber, as we can see him do on some clones before they take back the Jedi Temple. Or maybe he could be able to actually absorb energy and shoot it back, as he does with Emperor Palpatine's Force Lightning. That could probably be implemented for many other things, whether it's flamethrowers, explosions, or just normal blasters. Having him actually catch them and then throw them back right at the enemy would be a very cool and unique ability to see in the game. Moving on, we have some non-prequel era heroes, or well, pretty much only one, and I think you guys already guessed who it would be: Rey. She is the obvious hero of the sequel trilogy and The Force Awakens, and she has a lightsaber, force powers and all that kind of stuff. I'm not sure how interesting she would be to play based on The Force Awakens alone, but maybe they could sort of tweak her to how she will be in The Last Jedi instead, and have her be somewhere where she actually knows how to use force powers and haven't just discovered them like 5 minutes ago. I think that would be a cool spot to see her in, maybe in some new outfit that we will see in The Last Jedi as well, and not just take something from The Force Awakens. I'm actually surprised that pretty much no one suggested Finn at all, and I think Finn and Rey would be the two main heroes in The Force Awakens, but it was pretty much only Rey and Clone Wars heroes, which is why I decided to go with Rey. And lastly, we have a sort of in-between hero, I guess you could say, which is Rex. He is in the prequels, but he is also in the Rebel series. And for those of you who don't know, well, if you haven't watched the Clone Wars or the Rebels and don't want to get spoiled, you might want to click away, but I think most of you know that the clones turned because they had chips implanted in their brains, and Rex was one of the few who actually took that chip out before Order 66, which is why he's still helping the Jedi and the Rebels during the Galactic Civil War, or at least in the Rebel series. So he would work really well both in the original trilogy and in the prequels. It kind of depends on how they want to implement that system, and we still don't really know if Rex is alive by the time of the original trilogy or not, so that's also a little bit tricky. But I think we need some more non-lightsaber wielders, because the rest of them on this list are lightsaber wielders. And I think in the next video, when I will be talking about the villains, we will probably have more non-lightsaber wielders, since we have all the bounty hunters and things like that. But on the light side, it is mostly lightsaber wielders that are the main characters, except for Leia, Han, Lando and all those characters we already have in the current game. But I think these 5 on top of the ones we already have would be a good addition. Maybe at least one more from the Force Awakens, whether it's Finn or someone else. But well, that is gonna wrap up this list. Make sure to leave your thoughts in the comments below, what you think about these 5 heroes on top of what we already have, and which combination of heroes you would like to see in the next game, both if the Clone Wars is included and if it isn't included. Because if the Clone Wars isn't in the game, we have a lot less heroes to pick from, so that's something to keep in mind. In the next video, I will be going over 5 villains, so make sure to leave your top picks for the villains you want to see in the next game in the comments below. And to continue the way this video worked out, I will say that you should probably suggest heroes that aren't in the current game. I will probably already bring those up and say that, well, of course the Emperor and Darth Vader will be in the next game, but on top of the villains we have in the current game, which ones do you want to see outside of that, both in the original trilogy, sequel trilogy and possibly the Clone Wars. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, may the Force be with you.